when we were children growing up on Post Creek, there was no irrigation and the creeks wasn't disturbed. There's all kinds of native cutthroat trout, native whitefish, and a few species of rough fish. We had a lot of, not a lot of them, but quite a few dolly vardens. And the fowl, that is upland birds, was there's a lot of prairie chickens. There was a lot of ruffed grouse. And right below our old house there in the spring, you could hear them drumming all up and down the creek bottom. There ain't any there now. Prairie chickens is gone. Fishing has changed. The pollution come in with the irrigation, and the native trout, the only place you find them now is up these little creeks up in the mountains. And down in the bottom, the only thing we got left there is rainbow trout. And according to the biologists, they claim that, well, my grandson worked for Harriman a while, and he said that a native cutthroat trout won't live unless he's in pure, clean water. That's why we don't have them here anymore. And then they introduced other species like eastern brook. Now pikes come in, sockeye salmons come in, and from where we lived on Post Creek west clear to the river, there was nothing there. That was all big open prairie. There was a lot of waterfowls, different things, different kind of ducks, snipes, and find a lot of bald eagles and golden eagles out there, a lot of coyotes, a lot of muskrats, stuff like that. And now, since everything has changed, why we have altogether different, everything's changed. The waterfowl don't come in here like they used to. And the frogs and things, you could go around them potholes and you could hear them croaking there all the time, lots of them. You don't see them anymore. And big green frogs that we used to catch on the meadow, and some of them out west of Charlotte used to have fried frog legs. There ain't any of them anymore. And down next to the Buffalo Park, that used to be a great place for these curlew. And you ride down there in the spring of the year when they're nesting, and they'd fly right down, hit your hat. They're so cranky about their nests. Now there ain't any down there. You don't hear them, you don't see them. And there was a lot of buzzards. You could get out on that prairie and see 4 or 5 of them buzzards circling around when you knew there was a dead animal there of some kind. Then north of Crow Creek, Round Butte, Valley View, and that country. That's where the buffalo stayed most of the time, on both sides of the river. Very seldom I'd ever see one come on this side of the Crow Creek. But up around where Horty Reservoir, they call it now, and up in there and towards Valley View, why, that's where they stayed all the time. Worlds of horses, lots and lots of Indian horses, and some cattle. They used to have a horse roundup and start at Sloan's. I think they got a golf course there now. They used to, when I was a kid, they called that Sloan's Flat. And that was a horse roundup there for a while. Then they'd move down to our place at Post Creek, and it'd be about 2 weeks there, and gather horses all over where the park is now and down along the river. See just hundreds of horses in bunches. That'd be about 2 weeks. The Indians would run wild horses in the daytime and stick game at night. All up and down the creek by our old place, by my granddad. That was a campground. And horse buyers had come in from the east, mostly from Pennsylvania. And they'd buy horses, and some of the guys would either take a slick-eared horse or he'd take his money, whatever they give him. That's what he'd play stick game with. And that'd go on 2 weeks there, and then their next move would down here to Father's. And they'd round up there for another couple of weeks. And then they'd have, when more cattle would come in, then they'd have cattle roundup. There's one that'd be on the east end of where Nine Pipe Reservoir is. They used to bunch there. And then way down west of Charlotte where they'd bunch another bunch. And they'd generally have 2 roundups. They'd have a spring roundup. That's when you'd brand your calves. And then in the fall they had what they call a beef roundup. That's when they went out and cut out their beef, dry cows, 3- and 4-year-old steers. And that's where a lot of the ranchers paid their expenses. They'd Missoula Mercantile and all them different big outfits and extend your credit all during the summer, and then when your fall come, that's when you, and that happened there.
Who were the people who did the horse roundup?
Huh?
Who was it that did the horse roundup?
Oh, all the Indians that had the horses, my dad, my uncle, my granddad and his sons, and all the Indians, different Finleys, and different ones. There was a lot of, on the river there was a lot of horses down there around Horseshoe Bend and then that country. That was old Alacott. He was an Espers, run a lot of horses. And then, of course, the fellers across the river, I think that just above the old bridge here, Dixon, I think old Marcial lived there. he branded with a turkey track. And I think all them guys along his side used to round up and krill at his place. And up on the Camas Prairie, I didn't know too much about that. That's about the way the livestock run.
I've floated down the river many times, and on the west side of the river, between Buffalo Bridge and Sloan's Bridge, about halfway, there's still an old cabin standing there that a lot of people, I've heard them call it the Nez Perce home site.
Well, that was Alcott's cabin. That's in that horseshoe bend. Yeah. There was an old dugout canoe set there for years. Joe Gardepy was having some arts and craft deal in that Indian dance every year west of Polson. So I wanted him to get it. I said, you go get it. Take it up to your place. I said it'd make a nice flower bed. The back end of it would kind of rotted out. So I told Stone about it. Actually, no, it wasn't Stone either. I guess it was Wright. Anyhow, it was one of the superintendents. I told him about it. He got all excited, and he said, I'm going to send the road crew up there. And they went up there, and they crated it. They brought it down here to the church, and they set it alongside of the fence there, doing Centennial in '54. And then they sent it to Helena, to the historical outfit. And there's some young fellers over there said they were going to rebuild it with wood filler so it'd look like it did in the first place. But I went back there a year or two afterwards, and they hadn't done anything to it. It was setting down in the basement. And that dugout canoe, my brother Johnny and my dad, he told me, I've heard him mention a couple of times, but they'd go down to the river, and one of them Nez Perces would come across in a dugout canoe, and they'd swim their horses across, and he'd take them across in a canoe. And these old canoes was dug out of a log, out of a big cottonwood log. This one up there at Alcott had it, still had a lot of the old axe marks on it. So I don't know if they've ever done any more with it or not.
When did Alcott live there?
He left there about 1910 or 11.
And did anybody ever live there after him?
Oh, I guess there'd be few lived there. I think Carl Davis lived there a while. I ain't sure.
It's a beautiful spot.
Alcott was there, and Jackson Sundown had a place right close there. And old Cayula, he settled down there on Crow Creek, right there where that, they call it the Rocky Butte now. He had that place right across there. That was an old campground. And old Cayula was an uncle to Pat Adams' mother. And he lived there until he died, and he's buried up here. But Alcott, he went down to Umatilla, and I think Jackson stayed around Umatilla part of the time, but I think he's down on the Snake River or someplace when he died.
Was he a part of Joseph's band of the Nez Perce?
Yeah. This picture I got here of old Sam Tilden, him and Jackson, I said, was hid under a buffalo robe, I suppose, when they had the fight in the Big Hole. And Sam's family, when they surrendered over in the Bear Paws, why, they got away. And they went up into Fort McLeod. And they stayed there for, I think he said a couple of years. Duncan, my dad's older brother, was living at Ravala then. He went up and got him. They come down to Ravala and stayed with Duncan a year or two, and then they went back to Lapway, Idaho. And when we had the centennial at Post Creek in '47, Sam had that outfit on. And after he got back to cul-de-sac, why, he sent Mrs. Whipperud a picture when he was young, so she put the young face in that outfit. And when they found out that we was related to him, I come home one day and she'd give us that for a Christmas present. They had a $1,000 tag for university when we got it. And when we had the centennial, she had a lot of paintings, big ones like that, mostly of the Southwest and Browning. We had a museum in the old house. By golly, she left us a lot of paintings and quite a few little Navajo rugs. When everything was over, we couldn't find her. So we finally located her at Swan Lake. So we got her stuff all back to her. Then never heard from her for a long time. One day she walked over to the house and she said she'd been in the Southwest and wasn't feeling good. So she thought she'd start a studio in Missoula. So she got in Missoula and she said she just couldn't stand it. So they moved out on the Jocko River up in the canyon. She said, I just fell for that place and I felt good there. And that's where she had her studio when she died.
How are you related to Sam?
He's related on my grandma, my dad's side. See, my grandmother on my dad's side is half Nez Perce and half Iroquois. And on my mother's side, his grandma and them were related to the Charlot outfit.
Well, considering that, could you tell me something about the story of when the Nez Perce came through the Bitterroot in 1877?
The only thing I know about that outside of what Sam told me, we were going over to the Big Hole battlefield. I said, we'll take a lunch and we'll go there. Yeah, he'd be glad to do that. So he went back down to Idaho, and when he come back, he was getting so senile, and I talked to him, and I could see it'd be hard to take him, so I didn't ask him. But he told me a little about them going through, and my grandpa Dishaw was with the volunteers that went to that Fort Fizzle out of Lolo. And he said he said Joseph wasn't wanting to fight anybody. He said they watched him from their fort. They went up over the top of this little mountain right back of them and back down into the bottom. I guess that's why they called it Fort Fizzle. And all them old volunteers, Alec Matt, my grandpa Dishaw, I suppose some of the volunteers, all them old timers. Just about 2-3 years before my granddad died, damn if he didn't get a pension from the Army. And up at Ronan, the guy taking care of the cemetery told me he had some veteran stones there for them fellers. So I went and looked at them, and they had my granddad's name spelt wrong. They had a Dishon, and the date was wrong. I wouldn't take it. And the other one was Big Pierre, and it said. And I think I told him to send that down to Arlee.
Did they ever actually fight against the Nez Perce?
No, they didn't. Oh, some of them volunteers was in that big horrible battle, but that wasn't the ones that my granddad was with.
None of the Flatheads went over there.
No.
Didn't Joseph ask Charlot to ally with him, to enter into alliance with him when he passed through the Bitterroot?
No, I think, as near as I think it, I think Charlot just told him